And now, please help me enthusiastically welcome Hugh.
I'm Hugh. I am an alcoholic. I'm grateful to be here, and got a little story to tell just to loosen up. So when Mike asked me a couple months ago, I checked with him a few days ago, and he said, yeah. And at the end of the conversation, he said, oh yeah, and wear a tie. And I thought, well, gee, I hope I have one. Long story short, you don't have to like everything about AA, but you do need to respect it. So I dug around, I found a tie, I found a shirt, and here I stand. So glad to be here. Thank you, Mike. Well, I'm going to tell you a couple more stories just to relax a little bit. So I met with a sponsee this morning at 8 o'clock, and I don't remember how the topic came up, but we were soon engaged in a vigorous conversation about throwing up and barfing, right? And I said, you know, a good first step for me is to remember that at the age of 17, I lived in Philadelphia. And me and my buddies would take the train up to New York City, about a 90-minute train ride. We would tell our parents that we were going to go to the art museums. But you could drink at 18 and in New York, and I was 16 or 17, and we would be blackout drunk before we got out of the train station. And I woke up the following morning on the floor of a hotel. I had no memory of how I got there, and I couldn't move. And I'm, you know how you know that, remember that? You're laying on the floor and you're kind of, where am I, and how did I get here? And then I can't move. And I thought, shit, I'm paralyzed. Well, what had happened is I had stumbled in a blackout, one of my buddies helping me. I had thrown up on the floor and then passed out. And I had laid in my puke, which dried, and I was attached to the floor. So I was stuck. So I peeled myself up, and I remember turning and looking. I could see the pattern of my sweater. Yeah, that's a good first step for me, right? The other thing I did a little reading this week. I go off campus. Not everything I read is conference approved, and I read a lot of by a man named Richard Rohr, and he wrote in the last couple weeks in his email messages about how organizations comprised of people that come together for and share a belief have three pools of wisdom. One is print or scripture, the Bible, the big book, and a basic text. The second one is tradition, which would be how our experience as a group evolves over time. And then the third is experience, our own experience. And I like tradition. There's formal tradition, these, and then there's informal tradition. Wearing a tie is an informal tradition, I think, that came out of Pacific Group or California. I had never heard of it when I moved here. From Wisconsin. Another informal tradition is my home group is Sunday morning stag here. And when people come up for their coins, you're told not to clap because there's 100 men in the room and you can't hear. So the secretary says, and please don't clap. And of course, second guy up, I mean, that's hard, right? And we all shame him and go, oh, you dumb, you know. But that's an informal tradition. And I'm going to finish introducing myself in the way that my old home group, my last home group in Wisconsin, taught me. Hugh, alcoholic, my sobriety date is October 19th, 1973. I'm midpoint in my 47th year, if you're mathematically challenged. The other informal tradition in my home group would be if we were back, somebody would yell out, how'd you do it? Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you. Home group, Sunday morning stag, a beautiful group of men. My service commitment is I'm the treasurer. I'm the Donald Trump of treasurers. I'm never leaving. Any election is rigged. I also am active in sponsoring other men, which in the last year, quite frankly, saved my ass. I'm currently reading and talking about the third step because I have a sponsee who's on the third step. We were talking this morning, like I said, and he got through sharing his thoughts and his notes and some homework I had given him. And I looked at him, I said, well, he said, what? I said, well, have you made a decision? Yes or no? Well, I said, yes or no? It's not hard. Have you made a decision? Yes. I said, good. That's a start. That's all you need. All you need. The man that picked up a year. Congratulations. Coincidentally, it was the tradition in my first home group that when you got a year, your sponsor would give you a Zippo lighter. And I'm walking out the door tonight, and I put it in my pocket. And now I know why. I'm not going to give it to you, but but you know, this noise, Zippo lighter, Hugh H. 10/1973. Yeah, I still got that. I keep it on my desk. You might say, well, what if you didn't smoke? Nobody didn't smoke in AA in 1973. Picture being in this room, everybody chain smoking, and like, you know, enjoying it. You couldn't see. Really? Really? It's a little sad, but the truth is that my sponsor and all of the old timers from my home group passed away from smoking related conditions, which motivated me to quit at about the 3-year mark. So traditions. So I'm gonna tell you a lot about what happened if I can talk about 1 year from May of 1973 until May of 1974, and my sobriety date is right in the middle. So the last 6 months of drinking and using and the first 6 months of my sobriety was a pretty wild ride. In May of 1973, I was living in Appleton, Wisconsin. I was living with my girlfriend. I had flunked out of college 3 times. I had come to college in Appleton as a pre-med major. However, when you're drinking every day and you don't give a shit, you don't go to class. And apparently, if you want to be a doctor, they want you to show up. So I burned through that pretty quick and a couple other things. And I'm working part-time in a warehouse, a bookstore. I'm bagging, boxing books. And things aren't going well. My boss at the warehouse laid me off, told me to go home because I smelled. You ever drink so much beer and not gone to bed and gone to work and it's coming out of your pores? That's a bad smell. You know, I did a lot of crappy things, but a few of the things that really stick to me are things like that. Hugh, you need to go home, you stink. And my girlfriend was mad at me. I couldn't figure that out. She was tired of me rolling in at 3 in the morning, and she would lay in bed and wait for me. And then I wouldn't make it up the stairs, so she'd come down and find me laying. I had a big thing about laying on the floor, and roll me over, kick me just to make sure I was breathing. Apparently that's not terribly romantic. This is a tough part of the story for me, but I cheated on her and contracted a STD and given it to her. The public health department got involved, and the man from the health department called me. He said, "Who else have you slept with?" And I was remarkably honest, and he said, "Well, I'll give you a choice. You can tell her, or I will call her." So another part of my first step, in addition to being glued to the floor in my own puke and being told to go home because I smelled, was having to tell my girlfriend that she needed to go to the doctor. And the look in her eye, you know, I can see that today. She wasn't mad. It was like somebody had just, you know, run a sword right through her, you know. And then a couple weeks later, her parents came up from Illinois to take us out for breakfast. She was graduating from the college that I'd gotten kicked out of a few times. And the night before, I was just trying so hard to be good, you know. And I told her I wanted to get a pack of cigarettes and I'd be back at 7 o'clock. That was correct. However, I was 12 hours late, right? Go down to the bar, get a pack of cigarettes. I'm going to have a beer. You know, 1, right? 2. You know, next thing, it's 2 in the morning, they're turning the stools upside down. And I wind up in another girl's apartment, thankfully too drunk to do anything. And I woke up at 6:30 and shit. She wasn't too happy about that. I went out to breakfast with her and her parents. I'm sure I stunk. And then I told her, okay, I'll go to an AA meeting, right? Back off. Leave me alone. I'm going to go to an AA meeting. And I did. I went to one. I called the helpline in town. A really nice man came and picked me up, took me to a meeting. I don't think I stayed sober that day. I think I drank afterwards. I remember sitting at a table and talking to an older man, and he turned and he said, "Well, you know, I probably spilled more than you ever drank." That's not a helpful line. And I felt like saying, yeah, but if you smoked 6 barn loads of marijuana and dropped LSD, but I did. But, I just, it wasn't there. I wasn't ready. I knew about AA. My mom took me to Al-Anon family meetings when I was 14. My dad, alcoholic. My older brother, alcoholic. My mom would leave AA brochures all over the house, for my dad to read. He didn't read them, but I read them. And I kind of figured I'd wind up here one day, but I was about 40 years off. I thought I could have a good run, have my fun, maybe get up to 50, 60 years old, and then I'll show up. May of 73. So the girl bails, she leaves, she gets a good job in Madison as a school teacher. She's retired from that job. She and I are in touch on Facebook with my wife's permission. Thank you. And I go and I live, my family has a cottage, a lake home, middle of the state. And I go to live there because I don't have anywhere else to live. And I get a job working for a Christmas tree company. Some of you may not know that Christmas trees are grown as a crop. Okay? Big fields, 200 acres of trees. It takes 8 to 12 years to go from a seedling to a finished tree. They are trimmed every year. And my job was quality assurance. I was given a pouch with 3 different color tags. I would be dropped off in a field, and my job was to put a green tag on a tree that was ready to be cut, put a red tag on a tree that was cull, that just needed to be chopped and shredded, and then a yellow on a tree that needed another year in the field. That's my job. In about September of 73, I'm out in a field doing my job. I had not been to bed. I was hungover. And I was starting to have really bad panic attacks. And I had struggled with hallucinating post-LSD crap. And all of that just came crashing down. So I'm out in the middle of a 200-acre field surrounded by Christmas trees. They're like moving, glowing. I'm like, holy shit, I'm in trouble. And I went sideways, I climbed over a fence, and I went and I laid down in a field next, and I asked God to help me. First time in my life. Never, ever had talked to God. Avoided anything to do with religion growing up. But when things, what's the old saying? There's no atheist in a foxhole. I didn't know what else to do except to ask. I had to quit that job. I told him I was dying of a rare kidney disease. I mean, if you're going to go out, you might as well dress it up, right? You all go ahead. Have a good season. And then I spent a month in hell. Unemployed, unemployable, not eating, not sleeping, freaking out. There's a wonderful line in the How It Works. There are those too who suffer from grave mental and emotional disorders, but they too can. And I wouldn't use the word grave, I would use the word significant. I suffer from significant mental and emotional disorders. And the part that frightened me is that my friend wasn't working like it used to. the booze, right? I could drink a whole bottle of wine and feel perfectly sober. Or I could drink 3 beers and be shit-faced. And I couldn't find that high or that relief. And then you really got troubles, right? So I like to tell people that AA was my third choice. First choice, blow my brains out. Why not? Just put an end to it, please. I don't know what it was, a conscience, maybe my mama in my back of my head. I just knew that was wrong. Second choice, turn myself into the state mental hospital. And I tried to. I knew a doctor who I had worked for on his house a summer before, and he was the medical director at the state mental asylum. And I drove over and to see him and told him I had come to spend the rest of my life with him. Yeah. Yeah. I am not making this stuff up. And you know, and I was okay with that. I wanted out. I wanted out. And if that meant spending the rest of my life with paper slippers on and banged up on Thorazine and, hey Hugh, we got cookies in the sunroom. Woo! Let's go. Frankly, I just help me. I want out. This man, Dr. Belden, said a beautiful thing, and I want to remind you that I have said a prayer to God to help me. And the words that came out of Dr. Belden's mouth, I believe, were part of that answer. He said, Hugh, I don't know what's wrong with you, but you don't belong here. And he kicked me out. Well, then I'm really, talk about being a loser. You can't even get into the into the mental ward. So I go back to the cottage. I'm laying on the floor. I spend my day on the floor. My life was on the little mattress. You know, drinking Chief Oshkosh beer. That's low. I didn't want to smoke pot or do anything else. I was too screwed up. So third choice, I call a helpline again, and a woman on the other end tells me there's an AA meeting in the small town about 10 miles away, Friday night, and I should go. October 19th, 1973. I drive into town. And the term is agoraphobic. For me to get in my truck and drive into town was all I could do. But I made it into town. I walked into the door, little church, basement, and I walked down the steps, and there's a man standing at the bottom of the steps. Same man that gave me this. And I remember the look on his face, like, oh my God, what's this? 22 years old, long hair, freaky dude. I had 2 pairs of pants, which is about all I have now. One with holes and one with not so many, and I wore my good pair. He, came out of his trance and came up and introduced himself and then walked me over and sat me down at the table. He asked if I wanted a cup of coffee. And this was a 12 and 12 study group. I grew up 12 and 12 study groups. And whenever they had a new person, they would take step one. So they read chapter 1, then they went around the room and shared. And here's what I remember from that. A woman sitting next to me, and again, the tradition was when you introduced yourself, you gave your sobriety date. So I'm sitting there, and she says, my name is Fern, I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is October 6th, 1950. I was born November 9th, 1950. So this lady has been sober 3 weeks longer than I've been alive. And I'm like, whoa, this is serious. And she said, you know, it's up to you to decide if you're alcoholic, but the definition that works for me is somebody whose feet are planted firmly in midair. And I'm like, I'm home, right? And then a man who was visiting, his name was Paul. I found out later he was the district rep, and he was traveling around his district to go to meetings. And Paul said, hey, you know, being sober, being a part of AA means I never have to be alone again. And I'm like, that. So I make it through the meeting. Meeting's over. I stand up and I'm trucking, right? Bob follows me out the door, comes up behind me, puts his hand on my shoulder, slows me down. I turn and he hands me a piece of paper with his name and his phone number on it. And he says, call me. Big, big moment. I drive 10 miles back to the cottage. I had saved 1 can of beer as a reward for going to the AA meeting. Solid alcoholic thinking, right? I opened the fridge. I can still see it. You know, it was like 10 feet tall. Here's the frickin' miracle. I closed the door. I didn't drink it. And I haven't since. And I called Bob. And he said, well, we got another meeting. A couple days, I'll meet you on the highway, and you can follow me in. And I did. And then I went through withdrawal. Nobody told me about that. I'm back on the floor, shaking my ass off, stuff crawling. Bob had said, you know, if you're having trouble, call me. Bob, help. He says, well, I'll be over. And he lived about a half hour away. He shows up. What does he have with him? He has a bottle of Caro syrup, which was the old remedy for the shakes, pure sugar. Here, drink this. What the hell is going on? But I drank it. Made it through withdrawal. Started doing some step work. I had a really emotional fourth step somewhere in there where this book says the emotional dam breaks. And that's what happened. Just did my fifth step with Bob. He didn't run away. Sat on his couch. And then I kind of, I don't know if this was before or after that, but I had another episode of just falling apart. And I'm back out in a field, laying on the ground. And, you know, I'm sober, 3-4 weeks, but my life isn't like all better. and I don't feel better. And I don't want to go back. I know that. But I can't see my way forward. And I'm laying on the ground. And I figured this much out. Help! Go! And I'm just pleading with this unknown, unseen higher power. And I had a moment. And the only way I've learned how to describe this is imagine that what was going on in my head was a really bad heavy metal song. All the time. Loud. Bad. And then, dead quiet. Perfectly calm. I don't know if it lasted 5 seconds or 10, but it answered 2 questions, which I needed. Was there a higher power? Absolutely. And did that higher power care about me? Absolutely. And I made it through that day, and I made it through another day. I'm getting what I need, right? I get a job. I'm a petroleum transfer engineer, otherwise known as a grease monkey, otherwise known as a gas station attendant. Back in the day, right? You didn't get out of your car when you bought gas. Yeah. Somebody came out and pumped it for you. I'm Hugh, I'm really a doctor, but I'm here to I'm here to serve up some premium and check the oil, check the tires, wash windshield. Yeah. 2.25 an hour, 50 hours a week. Absolutely what I needed. How long did I work there? 30 days? 3 months? 3 years? 3 years. Building a foundation. Building a foundation. Sponsors tell me, don't matter what you do, you're learning the ropes. You're learning a lifestyle. And better jobs and other things will happen. Trust me. And he was right. So the other part of this, last part of it I want to tell you is that at about 6 months, I was starting to feel better, right? That's a dangerous time for us. What happened is that my ego reinflated. And I had started in a position not only of desperation, what I tried to describe to you was demoralization. Wiped out. Nothing. No plans. Oh, well, I'll blow my brains out. Oh, I'll go to the... Nothing. So 6 months in, I'm starting to feel better, and I'm noticing that people relapse. And I'm like, I thought you came into AA and just stayed sober. Thank you for not laughing. And then I said to Bob, I said, Bob, I don't have a relapse story. Like a cool relapse story, like, I was doing well and then I went and got drunk and I got all bad things happened. I came back in, here I am. I said, I don't have a relapse story. So I think I need to have a relapse story. And Bob, who was a wonderful man, my age-ish, 60, 70, the way he would look at me the part I want you to hear, I was telling him everything, even the unpopular thoughts. So I said, Bob, I got a plan. I'm gonna leave my house. It's a half hour to your house. I'm gonna get a 6-pack of beer. If you're from Wisconsin, if you can't drink a 6-pack in 30 minutes, move to Arizona. I don't know. So, six-pack, I'll show up at your door, knock, turn myself in, and that'll be the end of it, right? And you know, the look on his face was similar to when he first saw me. It was like, what? And he said, that's not what's going to happen. And that's when I understood powerlessness. He was right. So you know what a roulette wheel is? You throw the ball in, spin. You know, there's 1,000 spaces. You think it's going to land on the one good one. There's 999 that says it ain't going to happen. And I was able to let that go. And frankly, in 47 years, I've been tempted to drink or use twice. So when you say, how do you do it? Well, I did what we do so that we can experience the spiritual awakening and be blessed with the gift of freedom. Freedom from the obsession. It's gone. Lifted. The one time that I was sober 32 years, my dad had passed away. That was not the trigger. I volunteered to clean out his things, help my mom, and I cleaned out his medicine cabinet, and I found a full bottle of Oxycontin. And out of the blue, bam. Mike told me not to use the F-bomb, so I'm not, but I had a F-it moment, like, yeah, I think I'll try it. 32 years, and I'm gonna help myself to my dad's painkillers. Scary, scary moment. Grace of God. Somebody says, well, how come you still go to meetings, you know? Like, how come, you know, I'm going to go to 5 meetings this week. Well, I'm punching a card. You never know when you're going to need a little grace, right? And I cashed in all my chips that day, and I made it out of there and redoubled my program. Yeah, so how'd I do it? I followed directions. I stopped fighting. Best definition of surrender is just stop fighting. Put it down. Settle in. I mean, once I made it through all that craziness and trial and tribulations, I'm like, well, this is my life. This is what I do. It's okay. And in return for that, I've been given a life beyond my wildest dreams. I'm happily married. If you know my wife, you can tell her I said that. I'm happily married. I have 4 children, grown children. 3 are in program. Imagine that. They grew up in sobriety. The little girl that was up here, I used to take my kids to open meetings. They'd play in the back. I don't think it's part of this is there's a lot of genetics and a lot of DNA going on in my family. But when they fell apart like I fell apart, they knew who to call. And they called their mother or they called me. So I have a son, 30-year-old son with 7 years. I have a 35-year-old daughter with 13 years. I have grandchildren now. We either have a college saving fund or a treatment saving fund. Something's going to happen. I don't know what. But last thing I want to leave you with is, Yeah, so how'd I do it? Well, it's plain and simple. I did the work. I did what I was told, what was suggested. I've never drifted from AA. I've never taken a month off. I've always got a home group. I'm always trying to be of service. It's just easier that way, by the way. But I was complaining to Bob one day about people coming in and not staying, or they weren't serious or whatever. You know, I was all like righteous. And now that I'm sober 6 months. And he says, well, you know, Hugh, AA isn't for everybody. And I'm like, well, yes, it is. If I'm here, everybody should be here. He said, no, it just doesn't work for everyone. And here's the important part, but it works for me. And I don't have to know everything. I don't have to figure everything out. I don't have to like everything. One of the highlights of my week is when I swing by and I say hi to Mike and we complain. Yeah. It's all right. I just stick with it. I just make it work. If I don't like something, I work it out with my sponsor. Oh, some of you are new. Do not go on Facebook and go into sobriety group rooms. It's crazy. I make the mistake of checking that out once in a while. The question this morning was, if somebody is non-binary, gender fluid, do they go to men's meetings or women's meetings? I don't know. So I am at peace with it, with you, with that, with this. Sobriety, Alcoholics Anonymous has been very, very good to me. And I hope you all stick around and have the opportunity to see what I mean. God bless you. Thank you.